Welcome to all of it. We got all of it.
All of it. All of it.
Our guest is Secretary Madeleine Albright, Brian Cranston, Tank and the Bangas, Barry Jenkins, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Aaron Lee Carr, Esperanza Spalding, Gideon Glick, Helen Yoyemi, Fab Five Freddy, Banga Akanabe, Brene Brown, Tony Goldwyn, Tandy Newton, Jake Gyllenhaal. Welcome to all of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello.
What a pleasure.
Hi.
This is so fun.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We're here every day, 12 to 2. Impromptu concert.
I love it.
I love it.
I was there for the love of it.
You must tell the truth.
I'm sure everyone's perspective is unique.
There's a lot of truth about the pain of being an immigrant, but they're jokes. We find the funny.
It's our strength.
At what point do you think women's health care will stop being a political issue?
When half of Congress can get pregnant.
Ran out of words, but we do what we do. We don't have no board, so we got to trade twos.
So we trade twos. I was this really dope groove, and Allison was so nice to meet you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our February Get Lit with All of It book club event with Mateo Askaripour about his book, Black Buck. Get your questions ready because you'll get a chance to ask Mateo your questions. For those of you who don't know, I'm Alison Stewart. I host All of It on WNYC weekdays, 12 to 2. And for our regular book clubbers, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. For newcomers, welcome into our merry band. We like to call this a night out in. It's sort of fun. It's more like a book club party than just a book club. What we try to do with our books is we try to put them also in context and what's going on in the outside world. So since this book takes place in a startup and deals with systemic racism, I met this really nice guy in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, and he has been working on diversity and inclusion. His name's Tom McLeod. He's going to talk to us about his experience in the startup world. And because we make this thing a little bit of a party, we always have music, and Pharoahe Monch is going to join us. And we have 2 performances just for us, and they are fire. So you definitely want to stick around for that. And make sure you stay till the end of the program because we are going to announce our next book at the very end. But now let's get to the main event. Mateo Askaripour was working at a tech startup when he first started writing this book. And with Black Buck, he draws on his lived experience. He draws on his imagination. He draws on what it's like to work at a company that prioritizes whiteness over diversity and money over people. Now, thanks to our partners, the New York Public Library, 4,421 of you were able to get a copy of Black Buck to read along with us. Mateo Askaripour joins us now. Hi, Mateo.
Hey, Allison, man, 4,421, doing numbers.
It's amazing, amazing. You know, I think that people are so excited about this book because it's funny and it's smart and it gives you things to think about and it makes you laugh and it makes you cry and it makes you mad.
Yeah.
We'll talk about all of that. First of all, why did you decide to pursue writing? You're all sort of in the tech world for a while. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to write?
Well, for me, it was a necessary outlet. I mean, I've always loved the written word. I've been a huge supporter of literature throughout my whole life that came to me from my mother and my grandmother, who used to be an English teacher in Jamaica. She taught me how to read. She was making me read Clifford the Big Red Dog, Franklin, Frog and Toad, all of that. But throughout my life, you know, I'd return back to the written word here and there. But when I was in the world of startups and sales, I was just so in it. I was deeply embedded, and it was sales and the company I was working at 24/7. So when I became disillusioned with that world, I turned back to writing. And at first I was writing articles and essays about startups and sales. And it was later in the year of 2016 when I turned to fiction. And I realized that for me, fiction was a specific form of salvation. It's a little cliche to say, but it's like the definition of a passion. When you're doing it and you don't realize that hours are passing by, that's what happened to me with writing. So when I left my job in 2016, I decided to pursue it full time. And at first, you know, one manuscript didn't work, second manuscript didn't work. And fortunately, Black Buck did, because there's a world, Allison, where I'm working on like my 11th manuscript and I'm not here with you.
Well, you did have a few drafts of Black Buck. I know that before you sort of landed it. What were those initial drafts like? What was the crafting? What did you do to have to move it forward?
Great question. Yeah, the first draft was long as hell. It was 168,000 words. I mean, that's like 50 or 100 pages less than Moby Dick. Come on, what was I doing? And that's partially because I don't have a formal writing background. I wasn't disciplined on the page, but there was a lot of energy and I was free. And I wasn't afraid to come to the page with energy and imagination. So the first draft, there were more characters. For people who have read the book, Barry D, that character Barry D played a larger role. There were multiple subplots. There were other characters in the Happy Campers that I had to take out in successive drafts. But at the core, the novel has stayed the same, about a young man, being given an opportunity and then chasing a very American version of success, money, power, and status, and showing how he had to pay a cost. And that's reflective of a cost that many of us have to pay.
So I found this tweet from August 12th, 2019.
Oh, no.
I have a book deal. Damn, it's real. Was on a flight back to New York City 30 minutes after he took the offer and bawled my eyes out in the bathroom. This is a dream come true. I thank all of you for your support. Black Buck available everywhere. Spring 2021. We did it.
We did it.
What was that day like?
Man, you're bringing me back. That day, the day that we actually got the offer was surreal. I was actually in San Francisco because at the time I was consulting with tech startups across North America. I was making visits to San Francisco to visit a company that I was working with there. And we had this call scheduled with an editor. We were drawing up a lot of interest with a variety of different editors. And I was supposed to take a call on a Friday, but my plane got delayed. There was a snowstorm. And I said, I'll just take it on Thursday, even though I'm delayed. And I was in a hotel room in San Francisco in Chinatown and had the call. It went very well. My editor, she just expressed to me that there was so much enthusiasm, from the publisher, and that she wasn't going to mess with this book or edit my intentions out. And then got off the phone with her, called my agent. My agent said, hold on, the editor's calling. She calls me back and then says, we just got a preemptive offer. And I was in the airport trying to talk to, some of my confidants, saying, do I take it? Do I not? Eventually I took it. And like you saw in that tweet, just, I guess, midway in my flight, I went to the bathroom and I just let it out. I mean, it was years in the making, and I really felt like I had my ancestors and so many people behind me. So.
Yeah, that was the day that it was announced to the press, to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, before we dive into the characters, the title, Black Buck. All right,
Yep.
So we know Darren becomes Buck. They're Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
But Black Buck is also a slur.
Yes.
Yeah. Was there ever any pushback on the title?
Yeah, there was. Not a lot, but if there was like, can you talk to us a little bit about it? Can you illuminate, your thinking behind it? So you mentioned two of the four meanings. There's, of course, the historical context that you just alluded to, where for those who are listening who don't know, the Black Buck was the enslaved male who the enslavers believed was unruly, untamable. It's going to burn down the plantation, steal the women and the animals, and so forth. So I chose that title because Buck, especially towards the end of the book, he is not burning down these corporations, but he is burning down what they stand for and redefining what it means to work in America, and especially be one of the few, if not the only one, in these workplaces. Mm-hmm. And it also touches on the concept of wealth inequality and Black people generating some wealth, or Black bucks. So the pushback I got was, some people feel uncomfortable with the title. Can you just tell us why you chose it, what it means to you, even outside of the historical context? And once I explained, that was enough. But there are definitely people, Alison, who say, Black Buck, what is this? Like, I know what this means historically. And then they open up the book and more often than not, it seems like they give it a chance, which I'm grateful for.
Let's talk about Darren. When we meet Darren, he's got a good life. He's got a lovely girlfriend. He's got his mom. He's got his neighborhood. He's all good. He's got a good job. What is it that day that makes him reverse sell, Rhett?
I think that Darren doesn't even know. If you ask me as the author, and these characters for me feel very real, so I don't even want to speak on their behalf. But if you ask me to psychoanalyze Darren, it's that he was constantly being told that he had an immense amount of potential, but that he wasn't living into it. And then he saw one of his old high school classmates on the train, Adriana, and she's saying that she's just about to go for a job interview, and he has, you know, his Starbucks apron in his backpack. And then this man walks in who Darren sees all the time, but something just went off. It's like, you know, I don't know if it's exactly divine intervention, but, you know, there are moments when we just do something that's out of character. We take a leap and sometimes we don't know why. And that's what happens. And it just throws him into a whirlwind of a world that he was unfamiliar with, and it was just completely unexpected to him.
You had to create this world of someone.
Yes.
First of all, how did you decide what industry it would be that the app would deal with? And two, how'd you come up with the name? I mean, whenever I was watching Silicon Valley, it would crack me up. I'm like, Hooli, all these, like, they get so close, you know?
Yeah,
drop a couple of vowels here and there. But I'm sort of curious, like, someone and what it was about.
Sure. So the name Someone, it is a play on how these startups try to finesse their names just so they get a good domain name, right? And that's just a characteristic misspelling, so that they can still say the word someone, but not have to try to buy that expensive domain name. For me, I mean, to answer both of your questions, it came from an idea I actually had. Around 2012, I was walking to a friend's apartment in Alphabet City, and I was thinking about how they go to therapy and they really enjoy it, but they told me that they had to go through a few therapists in order to find the right one. So I said, what if traditional therapists trained in the West can't always reach people here? And vice versa, you know, in other people's countries. What if someone in India who is a follower of Hinduism, or someone who's a Muslim in Saudi Arabia or so forth, or someone who is Jewish in Israel, what if their different beliefs could reach someone over here? You know, because it's not traditional to the West. So I started jotting down notes, and I came up with the name Someone. I just thought that it'd be interesting, you know, someone there for you whenever you need them. And years later, when I left my job, I was like, nah, I'm sort of burnt out. I don't want to build this company. And then years after that, when it was time to write my book or write Black Buck, I said, why don't I build this company, but on the page? And I built it to the point where I exposed all of its flaws to where this will never actually be a real company, you know?
So once Darren sort of gets sucked into this company and becomes Buck, I'm curious, did you ever meet anybody that this happened to? Did you watch anybody go through a transformation like this? Yeah,
I meet this person every day when I look in the mirror. Yeah, this is part of my experience where I worked at this startup. I got caught up like Darren. And again, I'm not Darren, but I got caught up, and I started distancing myself from the people who loved me unconditionally, my family, my best friends. I had this mentality of, you don't get it. You don't understand. We're changing the world through selling XYZ, which really wasn't. And I felt as though we were curing cancer, which we weren't. So I fell into the term or phrase that we have now because of Get Out, the sunken place. And I had to awaken myself and with the help of others, wake up out of it.
So we asked folks to weigh in on our Instagram polls. You did as well. You cast your vote. We asked you and our readers, by the end of the book, if they ultimately forgave Darren for turning his back on his family and his girlfriend and all of his friends. You voted yes on forgiveness, along with 39% of our readers. 61% of our readers. 61% said no, they do not forgive Darren.
Wow.
So, you know, as you're writing Darren and Buck, we need to have feelings for him again, whether or not we forgive him or not. We need to have some sort of feeling for him at the end of the book. As you were writing it, how did you figure out how to do that? Because he does some pretty awful stuff.
He does. Well, it started with the beginning, showing Darren in his home with his mother, with his girlfriend, with his best friend, so that you see who he was before the big opportunity, before the transformation. And Darren, in my opinion, is a good person who made bad choices. And I'm using that word very specifically, not poor choices. He made bad choices. He did some terrible things and he hurt people. And he was also hurt at times, especially when he was in the workplace. So while I know that many readers dislike Darren for the majority of the book because of how he changes, I believe that they still stick with him and give him the benefit of the doubt that, you know, we should all receive the benefit of the doubt, you know, to be able to redeem ourselves. I think that's just my personal belief. And that's somewhat of what I'm saying with the book. But it comes down to the reader, whether they actually do believe that he has changed or could change. By the end, I'm hoping that the reader has invested enough that they want to see it through, and however they perceive Darren is on them. That's not my place to judge.
Rhett, who is the person who changes Darren's life by bringing him into someone and offering him this job.
Yeah.
How do you describe their relationship?
Man, this is tough. It is, it's like big brother, little brother, mentor, mentee. I've had some people describe it as slave master and slave individual type relationship, but I believe that it's more so big brother, little brother.
We did another Instagram poll, is what we do as we get ready for the big event. And we asked our readers if they thought Rhett actually cared about Darren. 71% said no. Wow. 9% said yes. But there's complexity in the relationship. I mean, even when everything goes wrong between them, Darren says, still, I loved him with all I had. He gave me the greatest gift in the world, one I can now give to others, an opportunity. You know, what's the glue? What's the attraction between these two men?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. There's the fact that Rhett really believed in Darren, or Darren felt as though Rhett really believed him. We can see that there might have been ulterior motives, you know, that Rhett had, and we saw Rhett do some things like use Darren as a human shield on Rise and Shine America. And when Darren ceased to be an asset to the business, Rhett betrayed him, right? But Darren really believes that Rhett believed in him, and that Rhett cared for him, and that Rhett loved him, and I believe it too. So I think that is the glue. When someone gives you an opportunity and say that you have the ability to move mountains or change the world in ways that you haven't before, it's hard to completely forsake that person or give up on them. There's also the fact that they went through adversity together. But what we see in a lot of these startups is that it's contrived adversity, that where we have this mission to change the world and there's this competition, or the world is against us, right? It's really artificial, but when you're in it, it's very real. It's very real. So they were in that together too, you know?
Let's bring in Clyde. Clyde is more of a clear-cut villain, a bad guy. And for all of his racism and for all of his bro-ness, there's this surprise at the end that he's been in a long-term relationship with a black man. Why did you want to introduce us to that part of his life?
No one's ever brought this up before. And I was thinking about this last night. I was like, why has no one ever brought this up? I'm not really sure. So I wanted to portray Clyde as three-dimensional, as a real individual, and not just this racist or this terrorizer, because it's very easy to classify him as such. We see Clyde consoling people when they think that they didn't hit their sales number. We see him hugging Rhett and crying, right? Clyde, I think, partially why he antagonizes Darren and treats him the way he does is not just because he's black, but because Darren becomes Rhett's favorite and Clyde's just actually hurt. But in terms of Clyde's relationship with this man, I wanted to show the complexity of an individual, whether they show it to other people or not. That's why. And that's also what I was just getting from the character Clyde, that this is who he was. He was someone who loved control. He was someone who liked to not be controlled. And one aspect I've seen that with people in my life is when they feel free and fluid in their personal relationships or romantic relationships. So I thought that would be a worthwhile addition to Clyde's personality and history.
And everybody watching, get your questions ready. We're going to go to them about next 5 to 7 minutes or so. So Mateo, you know, we're going to talk to Tom McLeod after we finish our conversation with you. Yeah. I'm curious, when you were in Silicon Valley, how would you describe, there's different parts of the world and different businesses, the racism comes out in different ways.
Yeah.
How does it come out in tech startups?
Not a culture fit. when you hear not a culture fit right after an interview, or for someone who quit, or for someone who got fired, you have to ask yourself, what is the culture and why didn't they fit into it? Because there's a fine line between cult and culture. And in my experience, the people who aren't a culture fit are people who don't fit the norm in an organization, with many organizations with the norm being, white male from a certain school, dressing a certain way, speaking a certain way. So there are just various manifestations and permutations of racism in these startups. And just racism takes on a different face today than it did, 50, 60 years ago, where it was just a white person wearing a hood. Now they're sometimes wearing Dockers, Patagonia vests, or Armani suits and so forth.
So Daren Buck ends up treating the people around him so poorly. He ends up evicting Mr. Rawlings. He ends up beating the bleep out of his childhood friend. Some of our listeners had comments about them. One wrote, Darren hasn't figured out how to be Daren and Buck at the same time. Another said, Jason is part of Darren's past that he thinks he needs to break down so he could be Buck. Darren is breaking everything related to his past. Jason is the physical reminder of what that was. Wow. What are your thoughts?
That one's big. That last one, I disagree with it, but I like that perspective, the metaphor there. My take is that Darren became someone else. It is not an alter ego. And to the first comment, I do agree with that. And that there's this duality, and he's just playing hopscotch between, Darren in Bed-Stuy and then Buck in Manhattan, and Buck wins out. And we see it at one point in the scene with him and Soraya, where she walks out of the spa and he says, F Darren, I'm Buck. So I think it's just a conscious choice. And I think that it's important for us to mention that these people in this book, for majority of the time, are young. Darren is 22, 23 for most of the time. Clyde's 24, 25. That's not to excuse the choices that they make, but they are young and they're turning into fully formed adults right in front of our eyes. And yeah.
All right, before I get to some listener questions, when you were on the show doing a preview, I asked you about some Easter eggs in the book, something we should keep our eye on. So you said the apartment in the sky, which we now know.
Yes.
He's in prison. But you said look out for a number. And the number I saw was his prison number, which is 8121988, which could be August 12th, 1988.
Yes.
Is that the number I was supposed to be looking out for?
Yes, that's the main one. Yeah, August 12th, 1988. Unfortunately, that's when Jean-Michel Basquiat died. And he's someone that I look up to and gives me inspiration. So that was paying tribute to him. But there's definitely loads more. There's like 10 or 15 more in there.
All right, I'm gonna have to go back. I thought I was all smart. All right, let's start going.
Oh, you got it though. You got the date and everything though. You got it.
Let's take some listener questions, viewer questions. Did Mateo have any alternative endings for Buck's character?
None that I was actually going to go with. There were so many ways that this could have ended. It could have ended with him and Soraya getting together again, having a child, and just, expanding the happy campers. It could have ended with him, I don't know, dead. It could have ended with him, just completely unaware of the harm that he actually caused other people, and just rising up at someone and, maybe, putting happy campers on the back burner and going back to Rect. Maybe he could have said, this was all too much. Let me just go back to the life that I created for myself. But there were none that rang as true as the way that it ended. And that's why I stuck with it.
Betsy wants to know, why didn't Darren's mother tell him about her cancer?
Hey, Betsy. That's a good question. I mean, Ma explains it in the letter that she thought that she was doing Darren a service by shielding him from her illness, so that he, while he was pursuing success at someone, wouldn't have to put that on hold, because she believed that he had already put his life on hold and staying home with her rather than going to college or pursuing a job other than Starbucks. So she just thought that she was protecting him in a way. And we see the consequences of that on Darren.
This is from Jonathan. He says, thanks for a thoughtful and engaging book. What were your influences to write this?
What up, Jonathan? Influences is part of my own life. Seeing also, having conversations with people who have been the only one, if not one of the few, in environments like this. And it's not even just the workplace. It could be a religious organization, a sports team, an institution of higher learning. So all of that inspired me. And probably one of the biggest inspirations is the fact that if you ask someone, quick, think of a salesperson, they will give you a white male. And I thought that it was time for America to have a new salesperson, a black man, no less, to root for and at times hate. And that was some of the inspiration behind the book.
Lily has a question that I was going to ask, so we'll merge our questions. Why did Darren ask his early trainees to do things that were illegal?
Listen, again, going back, Lily, thank you for the question, but going back to Darren being young, he's just figuring it out and ideas are popping into his head that he thinks are fun. Again, he had been through the ringer. He had put other people through the ringer. I think that he was just trying to spice things up and maybe scare off some of these inductees into the happy campers, thinking that they actually weren't built for it. Remember, Darren is really just trying to get Brian or one SDR to serve Barry. And then the responsibility of helping other young black and brown people and other people of color is pushed onto him. And he realizes that that's a more noble mission.
I also thought that really addressed something that I've heard in more diversity and inclusion panels about in Silicon Valley. There's no pipeline. What about the pipeline is one of the big things they lean on. And Daren and Buck is like, well, here's your pipeline. I'm going to build a pipeline.
Yeah, no, the lack of a pipeline is just an excuse. I mean, it's lack of awareness and opportunity in these communities that they deserve a space in these places.
This is interesting. This is Marina. Hey, Mateo. Hey. I work in a superior court in an almost entirely white section of New Jersey, and on the diversity committee, I used Black Buck to talk about racism in the workplace. Was this an intended message?
Hell yeah. Yo, Marina, thank you so much. That's incredible. People are telling me that they're actually reading this with their colleagues and it's having a real impact on the conversations they're having. I am so grateful. Thank you.
I just have to read this.
What's this?
Vulgar Geniuses asks.
Oh, I know them. I know them.
I thought this must have been an inside joke. If we could have a part 2 to Darren's story, where would he be doing, or what would he be doing, I guess?
Listen, I can start writing it in my head right now. You know, Darren is still in jail. He gets out. He's in prison. He gets out. He's not there forever. And then a new faction rises up, and him and the happy campers have to defeat them. And then Rhett's involved. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go, but that's probably where it would pick up. But if and when this is adapted to TV, you know, if it makes it past a couple series, then you will see how it continues.
There's a debate going on in the chat right now about whether Darren and company are working within the system or changing it from the inside. And can you actually even do that? Should you build your own system?
Great question.
And this is, what does Darren think?
I don't know what Darren thinks, but I'm so happy that this comment or statement was made, because the book is somewhat incomplete by the end. The idea isn't just to fill all of these white-owned organizations with black and brown people, right? That will only take us so far. I think that some of those people, not all of them, because not everyone's about it, some of these people need to get the tools after working in these places and then create spaces for us and by us. Some people also, like Jason, won't even want to work in those other environments, and they'll want to work with other black and brown organizations and then uplift the community that way. There's no one way, but I'm really happy that this was brought up.
Rachel wants to know, says, thank you for this book, Mateo. I was wondering what responses you've had from former colleagues in the tech industry who have read the book.
Yeah. Rachel, listen, I've had a lot of people who I used to work with who say, wow, I thought you were writing about our company one for one, and you didn't, even though you did include some things. Great book. There have been other people who say, Mateo, I don't remember white paint being poured on you or this, that, and the other happening. What happened? Was that before I started with you at our last company? I'm like, no, those parts are fiction. You don't have to worry about it. And then other people say that their eyes are being opened to things that go under the radar or they have never contended with because they are not a person of color. and that they have seen things happen and they wrote them off as jokes too, you know, or someone being overly sensitive, and that's opened up their eyes to all of that. So it's just a big win for me.
So for folks who don't know, you do your own sort of version of Happy Campers on Instagram Live, the series Talkin' Lit with Mateo, which gives people a chance to ask you about your book and about the publishing process and about writing. Why did you decide to devote time to this?
Well, for me, I truly believe that success doesn't really mean much if you can't help other people achieve it. So this is just one way for me to give back in a tangible way. You know, I do a lot of other things behind the scenes, reviewing people's queer letters to agents, manuscripts, helping people with their own business ideas, teaching them sales. But Talkin' Lit was just a great way for me to decompress while also just spending time with readers and other people who want to chat and learn more about publishing or just discuss the book. So I'm hoping I can keep it going in March and so forth, but it's been a blast so far.
A lot of people want to know if there's any screen adaptation coming.
Listen, I can't say too much, but if and when it gets to the screen, it will be in the form of a TV show. Stay tuned for news.
Are you doing any writing?
For that? I hope so.
Any more novel writing?
Oh, yeah. In general, yes, definitely. I'm working on another novel. I can't focus on it right now because it's just full promo with Black Buck. But yeah, another novel's in the works.
Mateo Askaripour, thank you so much for being our Get Lit author. You were a lot of fun.
Alison, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
So we here at Get Lit like to put our books into real life context. So we were thrilled to speak with someone who's had personal experience navigating startup culture as a person of color. I was moderating a panel in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, and I met Tom McLeod. Tom's worked in iPhone app creation. He's the founder and CEO of Omni, which is kind of like Airbnb for your stuff. You can rent it out to other people. He's an investor with Saltwater and now chief content officer at Coil. And we were on this panel talking about diversity inclusion in Silicon Valley. So we talked Tom into joining us for a little bit. Hey, Tom.
Hey, how are you?
I'm so glad to see you.
Glad to see you too.
One of the things I think's really interesting about your experience in Silicon Valley, and you shared this before, is sometimes people don't know you're Black right away. And so you're in a room with people and they are just saying things and they are being themselves and they are being candid. Can you share with us some of the things that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, this has happened beyond just Silicon Valley. I mean, that's definitely something that's happened my whole life. It's happened in nightclubs, it's happened in education, but it's definitely been more pronounced since sort of going on a professional journey into the tech sector. I think there's a couple things. So one of it is like the type of diversity that is actually commonplace is not necessarily like Black American male, but there's a large amount of Indian engineers and people of that nature. And so a lot of times people assume I'm an Indian engineer. So, you know, I hear comments about that and what does that look like? And then in sort of more rooms around venture capital and other stuff, when people are talking bluntly about diversity, you know, it's a little different than you see in the tweet. You know, sometimes it's just sort of like, well, how are we going to find more Black folks? You know, it's like you start to hear these very specific tones that are significantly softened with people's public images. And I would say they're delivered with a bit more frustration. Sometimes in the fact that they have to do this, not necessarily realizing the overt value that almost every single study has shown that building a better business long-term has diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of gender, diversity of all these different things. And I'm often sitting there being like, maybe we shouldn't look at this as a problem, but look at this as an opportunity. And then sort of being like, and I'm Black.
And I'm Black.
Hey.
So what are some things that you've learned about the way racism is expressed in startup culture?
Oh, wow. I think, you know, he nailed it a little bit earlier. You know, it's definitely this culture fit idea. It's definitely this pipeline problem. There's just a lot of words that soften it that feel like businessy platitudes, I think is probably where we'd end up there, that surface by trying to utilize data as this overwhelming, like, data is the way we make decisions, and the data is what we call the answers and how we decide how we're going to build these products. But people don't take into account that the data is biased. People assume that the data they're getting is just the facts, but in reality, it's who did you ask? Who was the sample side? Who was the network that you originally reached out to when you sent them the beta of your product? Who are you asking for more feedback? What does the team that's running your data look like? Are your bankers all white? Like, there's so many places here that I think it sort of becomes similar to the overarching national systemic issues. It is this kind of way where it's like, well, if the data told us to do this, then we would do it, but the data isn't telling this, and people aren't paying attention to the biases baked into the system a lot of times.
There's this quote in the book when Rhett, who is Buck's boss, is, they're talking about diversity and inclusion, and he says to him, "Race isn't popular, Buck. It's a dirty word, but diversity isn't. Everyone's talking about it. And the more people talk about it, the more attention it'll bring to whoever's leading the charge."
Sure.
Which made me think about virtue signaling. And it seems like there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think it's easier to soften the blow of calling out a specific acute issue. It's hard to say, we do not have enough Black engineers. That's a very hard thing to put in a tweet. That's a hard thing to put in a shareholder report. But it is a lot easier to say, we have started working hard on increasing the diversity of our product team. That can be interpreted in so many ways, that if the improvements are very small, or if the improvements that you're targeting aren't declared directly, you can kind of keep putting that in there for years. You can keep saying, well, we've made strides, we've been working on these things. But if you said something like, we don't hire enough Black engineers, and 2 years later you still haven't hired any Black engineers, it's pretty hard to walk it back. And so I think most people like to give themselves the widest berth possible with the communications that they put out around diversity broadly. And that isn't changing, because like PR and the polish is actually increasing around how people speak, not decreasing. There's more massaging of words before they go out. So
what is one thing, if you could shift one thing in Silicon Valley that you think could have a true impact on bringing in different kind of people into positions where there's opportunity for growth, what's one thing that could be done?
Wow. Oh, man. If there was a magic bullet, I mean, I think I would probably quit everything and just focus on that 100%. I think the broader idea is we are location biased. So expanding just where we are looking, and that's for customers, that is for early adopters of what you're working on, that is for where we are looking at putting venture capital and funds into. Largely the historic statement, and I did this, I was told when in 2011, hey, you should leave DC and move to San Francisco and like play in the big leagues. And I did it, and it worked out well for me. But that's a weird choice, that I left a significantly Blacker city and had to move to an unquestionably whiter population, certainly in the caste system of San Francisco, to succeed. And it's because you don't get as many shots on goal, you don't get the same ability to fail fast, and you have to work sort of double. So I think being able to see capital, time, energy, look outside is going to change a lot. And that's not saying that the Bay Area is going to stop being the center point, but I do think you're going to see potentially a positive of some of the pandemic things will just be a lot of people have gotten used to pitching from their bedrooms, or pitching from places that they weren't able to put a suit on, or weren't able to carry a briefcase, or weren't able to get on a plane and fly to a venture capitalist's office in Palo Alto. And that's going to change things because people are still finding great deals. Turns out that they're all over the place, and they might be, they might look differently. So I think there's a big opportunity there to sort of write the check for those options.
I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but once you got to be the boss and be in charge, what were some of the things that you did? Maybe you did them naturally, maybe you did them quite purposefully to make sure that all kinds of folks were represented.
Yeah, so I think there's two sides when you're in that position. So one is, who do you let invest? So, I attempted to have as many Black, Brown, Latino, Latinx individuals invest in the company as possible. That was like really important for me. Because I think the only way to sort of create real wealth historically in America is investments. So it's like, it's almost as important to let people who are working on that side, if you think you have a big idea, get the opportunity to then do that more often, because they are going to write those checks more frequently into people that look similar. So that was one, that was on just the building side. And then on the actual like running of the operation side, I mean, we just kind of blind hired. Like, I think that was just the first thing. I think the pipeline problem is kind of it's a myth. The problem is the problem isn't the pipeline. The problem is that like you are the filters that you're using before the pipe enters the building are removing your opportunities. So we were just casting wide nets, blind LinkedIn searches, pinging the broader network. Who do you know? And that's how we were making our hires. I think that led to certainly increased gender diversity. That was very obvious at the company from the beginning. And then in terms of racial diversity, it continued to grow and expand as the company got larger. I found with Omni, which I no longer run, but I found that Omni specifically had sort of a two-sided business. So we had people who drove vans vehicles that were on this operation side. And then we had sort of a product computer work group of people. And for me, one of the number one things we could do was have a clear path for how do you go from the warehouse to the office. And we did that, 7, 8, probably 10 times in a company that was 100 people. People ended up going on to customer support or into product management. And to me, that's the other opportunity. If you have a company that naturally has people that start at one spot, make sure there's a path for growth. Don't just be like, start at the bottom and stay at the bottom. No. Like Amazon could have literally probably hundreds of thousands of Black executives if they thought of the warehouse team as a growth channel for hiring, right? So like, let's do that.
Tom McLeod, thanks for making time for us.
So thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me be here.
See you later. So, when we think about our musical guests for Get Lit, we try to think about somebody who is connected to the book in some way. Well, this book is very much about New York. Our protagonist is from New York. So we were fortunate enough to find Pharoahe Monch. We didn't find him, he's huge. He's been called one of the greatest technical rappers of all time by Vice. Growing up in Jamaica, Queens, he got his start as half of the duo Organized Confusion in the 90s. He stepped out as a solo artist. He's got a new project, a hip hop fusion trio called 13 that features, I'll make sure I get the names right, Marcus Machado and drummer Daru Jones. We have a performance. This is so great. This is the song Oxygen from their debut album, A Magnificent Day for an Exorcism.
I need you in my life like oxygen. Holy water, come and wash away my sin. I want you. I need you. I can't breathe. Let me be your hydrogen. Come rain down on the tree. superlative word opulent, indigenous occupant, angelic in your moccasins with the kinetic acumen to rid me of my toxins. You can dictate a doctrine on a cathartic spin into open heart surgery for the brokenhearted. My high vibrational guidance system my backbone, exactly. No phone tap, no just intellectual track meets. Somewhere close to a sexual intercourse and a track meets. I'll hold you in my arms and I'll kiss you till your body's sore. I need to get. I need you in my life like oxygen. Holy water, come and wash away my sins. I want you. I need you.
And Pharoahe Monch joins us now. Pharoahe, thank you for being with us tonight.
Yes, of course. My pleasure.
That song, Oxygen, there's so much going on in that song. And I know art is for each of us to interpret differently. But what is that song about for you?
For first and foremost, I'm a chronic asthmatic. So oxygen is everything to me. Then secondly, it's kind of like one of the love songs on a hardcore album. So I wanted to kind of mask it in darkness, but it's actually a love song about someone who would be my oxygen to me, and yeah.
Okay, good. I thought it was a love song too. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You did an interview back in 2014 when you released your album PTSD, and I want to read this quote. I have a new project on deck for autumn. It's a super aggressive, super rock, super testosterone 10-track album, which should be done for Halloween. Pharaoh kind of dies at the end of PTSD, and I'm introducing this new character called 13 from my new rock sound. Is this a version of that? This new 13 record?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been rocking with that number and that persona for a minute, but I thought I should use 13 to embody the three of us, myself and Marcus and Daru, because it just is a number that creeps people out, and it feels rock, and it feels mystical and against the rules and all of those other things. So I just went with that for the name of the group, and they rocked with me on it. So everybody agreed that we would be 13 instead of me being 13.
Well, as long as we're creeping people out, the word exorcism does that occasionally.
Yeah.
But it can also, people can exercise bad things though.
Right. Same thing. I knew that title would kind of grab people's attention, but it's a good thing in the sense that it is a cleansing. And I think globally, and America could use an exorcism, as so ourselves, could stand to atone in certain situations. So that's basically the gist behind the title, is us, myself included, getting to a 0 point and a cleansing point.
What was appealing to you about going for this sort of super rock, or in your words, super aggressive, super testosterone rock sound?
Years ago, I've been thinking of this, record for over 10 years now. So years ago, I wanted the rock feel, and it shows up in a lot of my music anyway. But around that time when I said that, I was thinking of being on stage and having my guys and doing these really aggressive performances, and really just getting the crowd involved, and mosh pits and all that other good stuff that you like at rock shows and hip hop shows. And so that's what I had in mind. So that's what my mindset was when I was saying that. And if you listen to the songs, they lend themselves, and I was hoping they would translate to performing on stage at live shows. But fortunately, we've been able to do things like this and have platforms like this to show, you know, what we could do.
Tell me what it is you like about working with Marcus and Daru.
The most important thing with this project, in terms of mashing the hip hop culture with the rock culture, which I feel is very innate, was to keep the sensibility of the hip hop side. So I was with my longtime co-producer, Lee Stone, and other amazing producers, Super Ugly, Marco Polo, Knots, and just to keep the hip hop temperament. And these guys do it better than most in that genre. And they produce records, and then I brought in, was thinking Marcus Machado on the guitar side, because he's very, very, very sought after and super guitarist on the jazz side, on the soul side, as well as the rock side, and the I would say Jimi Hendrix vein. And then Daru, I've known for a long time as well, and played with Jack White and on the rock side, and Slum Village on the hip hop side, and Black Milk and Talib Kweli and different artists. So they both came from different worlds, and I felt I can implement them into the idea that I had for this project.
I want to ask about your rapping. Every time we would play the promo on the show and I would hear Attica and sciatica, it just, every day, it was everything. Does that come to you naturally, or is that something that you had to hone?
I love words and I love writing, as Mateo was saying earlier. I've always loved writing, but you know, words stick out to me, like they just stick in my head. And sciatica, I don't have it, but it's talked about in my age group, as you can see with the Grays. It's something that people I know are dealing with at this point. You know, it's just a great word to me. So I was like, how can I fit that in a song that talks about getting older and maybe getting Alzheimer's, and what would that person be dealing with along with their Alzheimer's? So, you know, I was like really delve into the life of a person who would be that old.
When do you write? How do you write?
I'm inspired by films, especially when I'm working on an album. I don't listen to a lot of other artists when I'm working on music, for reasons of not borrowing from them or being inspired in that way, that, you know, taking from them is still embedded in me as something that I don't want to do. So I go to film and just great conversation with great conversationalists that inspire me to write songs. And life, you know, living life, which is why I take so long in between records to gain, you know, content to write about is what is inspiring to me.
As someone who loves words, do you have we love books around here. Do you have a favorite book, a favorite read, or a book you'd like to recommend?
Because I'm like dystopian sci-fi guy, I'm a big Octavia Butler fan. And so anything Octavia Butler, I'd recommend, you know?
We just did a salute to her yesterday on the show, because yesterday was the 50th anniversary of her passing. Yeah, she's wonderful. For people who, this is going to be on the radio, but I'm going to describe to people that you are sitting in front of 3 shelves of 120 action figures, maybe. I can't even count how many action figures are behind you. Tell us about your world.
I'm in the basement of the house right now, where the makeshift studio is, and during the pandemic, I needed some connection. So I kind of went back to my Marvel and DC childhood upbringing, and met a couple of guys on my socials who were also into this, and just realized it was a huge community of collectors out there. And these people put me on to so many awesome pieces that I started collecting, and then I just went haywire. Everything you see behind me is I picked up in the last 3 months.
And people should go to your Instagram because they can see what we're talking about if people are listening to this on the radio. You know, this book takes place in New York. There's so much New York in this book. You're a New York person. How does being a New Yorker influence your work and your art?
It does from the inception of Pharoahe Monch, in terms of you know, starting with organizing, just being around the culture of hip hop from its humble beginnings, in terms of the breakdancing and the graffiti and all the aspects of it. I was just so attracted and had to be involved in it. It wasn't about making records or getting a record deal in that sense. It's just culturally something that I was so attracted to in the beginning, and gained so much respect for it in terms of how can I, you know, use my talents in one of these different fields. I was in an art school, art and design high school at the time when I first was introduced to hip hop. And, you know, I didn't know what or how I was going to be a part of it, but I knew that I was. And so just embracing all of the different, you know, different forms of it, I think shaped me into who I am today as an artist, in terms of the culture and just being in New York City at that time, and park jams and all the rest of it was just, I couldn't even put it into words how electric and intense it was. And so my love for it comes from that, from a very pure place of hip hop culture.
We're going to go out on a song from A Magnificent Day for an Exorcism. This one is Kill 'Em All Again. What would you like people to keep in mind as they listen to this track?
Like I said in the quote that you read, it's aggressive, it's hardcore. It's about pushing the art forward. It's about being art first and the freedom of art, and pushing art to the forefront and getting rid of all of the shit that we don't need, excuse my French, in terms of what's motivational and inspiring to people.
And in terms of French, just for our viewers, this one's for the grown folks. This song has some grown-up words in it. So if the kids are in the room, you do what you want to do. My guest has been Pharoahe Monch. Pharoahe, thank you so much for being part of our book club and sharing your music with us.
Thank you so much.
For human existence, school you all. 13's a stickler for sticking stitches in your voodoo doll. I'm as malicious as wicked witches with the broom and all. I kill them again, shit on them, then exhume them all, then kill them again. Kill them again. Kill them again. Kill them again. When you send them on your cell like Instagram is your scripture. Caught on a spell with no plan to see the bigger picture. Inauthentic, addicted to internet affirmation. Quintessential assholes, mentally masturbating. Fascinated with fast souls, captivated by cash flow, although eventually we will all be acclimated. Blind lust for the acceptance from the masses who flock to a pit, the view from worm's eye, who's on top. A mockery of what it actually means to be free. Fuck, stuck in the matrix, sucking the devil's cock. Kill him again. Kill him again. Kill him all again. Kill him all again. Kill him again. Kill him again. Kill him all again. Kill him all again. Kill him again. Kill him again. In a cinema in the cell like Instagram is just picture. Caught on a spell with no plan to see the bigger picture. Delusional, desensitized, careless. Stuck inside the web with no inner awareness. It's beautiful though, the removal of true cynics. The lieutenant who rebukes the genetics of fools blended. The stupendous when it's the moment to administer eugenics. The onus is on me. See, the bonus is their sleep, so the felonious one seeks a harmonious intellectual world where it's only just lyricists, the addition of truth, the subtraction of fuck shit, a collection of all three. Innovate, be identified as an adversary who doesn't demonstrate the compassion to be free. And without asking for votes, cause that's weak, I'm simply slashing their throats while they sleep out. Kill them all again. Kill them again. Kill them again. Kill them all again. Kill them all again. Kill them again. Kill them again.
Again, thanks to Pharoahe Monch and 13, as well as Tom McLeod, and of course, our author, Mateo Askaripour. This has been a terrific Get Lit, and I want to tell you about our next book, but first, we have a couple of people we want to acknowledge and recognize. We want to say thank you to our partners at the New York Public Library for helping get all of these e-copies into your hands, the hands of New Yorkers every month. Tony Marks, Brian Bannon, and Andrew Medler. Thanks to the Green Space team for helping us put this on and making everything look so great and all the graphics, and it sounds and looks great. That's Jennifer Sachi, Cam, Ricardo, and David. And the great producers who work on Get Lit, that is Megan Ryan, Jordan Loff, and Simon Close. And now to our March Get Lit reveal. Our author next month is a woman who is affectionately known as the poet laureate of the internet. Her memoir, Priest Daddy, was named one of the 10 best books of 2017. And her latest book, her first novel, is already earning tons of accolades. We're going to be reading No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. The story follows a woman who finds herself newly internet famous as some of her social media posts blow up on a platform called The Portal. Taking advantage of her new fame, the woman starts to travel around the globe to meet her fans. But when she receives two urgent texts from her mother, one that says something has gone wrong and how soon can you get here, real life suddenly cuts through her virtual reality. No One Is Talking About This was named a most anticipated book of 2021 by Vulture, Harper's Bazaar, BuzzFeed, and many more. The New York Times says Lockwood is a modern word witch. Her writing splendid and sorted by term. So, Patricia Lockwood, our next book. New Yorkers, head to wnyc.org/getlit to find out how to borrow the e-copy from our partners at the New York Public Library. We will do this live event with Patricia herself on March 31st. So you have a good long time to read this book. Patricia will be here, and we're thrilled to be able to announce our musical guest is John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats. So that's it. Mark your calendars, March 31st, Patricia Lockwood, John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats. And in the meantime, make sure you follow us on Instagram at allofitwnyc. That's where we hold our book club discussions in between these live events. Once again, thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm Alison Stewart. I appreciate you. I appreciate your watching, and happy reading, everybody.